Hello, hello. I'm back with round 8 from the 2025 Grenke Open. So going into this game, I had 4.5 out of 7 after just losing the last game, which was kind of tough. But this was the final day, so 2 games on this day, and I definitely wanted to have a strong finish. So for this game, I was paired against FIDE Master Liwia Jarocka, around 22:30 from Poland. And yeah, the game started e4. I went for the Sicilian, knight f3, and I decided to play knight c6. And here white goes bishop b5, so we get another Rossolimo. So at this point, I've now had 2 games as black in the Rossolimo. I also had 1 game as white. So in the first round, I played knight f6 in this position. Then in round 3, I played d6. And for this game, I decided to repeat d6 because I just felt like it was a little bit simpler to play for black. So castles, bishop d7, rook e1. This is, I believe, the main line these days, where typically on a6, white wants to bring the bishop back to f1. I think that was how my third round game continued. And then I either started with knight f6 here, or maybe I started with bishop to g4, but that's kind of the typical thing here for black, is to give up this bishop on f3 and then knight f6, and then black plays this position against white's 2 bishops. For this game, white actually went bishop takes c6, which I remember looking at a little bit before the game, but I didn't fully spend a lot of time on this. So I take back, d4, takes. And now basically we get like an open Sicilian structure where white has already given up the bishop, which is a little bit strange. White doesn't often do that. But mainly white's idea is to play c4 here and then get knight c3 in. So white wants to get like a Marazzi bind, and then white definitely has like a nice grip on the center. So I think my prep was to play rook c8 here, c4, knight f6, knight c3, and then like g6, I think, for black. And yeah, I feel like it's a playable position, and that's kind of what I had in mind, at least in my notes. Over the board, though, I just started thinking like, well, why not knight f6? Like attack the e4 pawn, ask if white wants to play knight c3, because then white wouldn't get c4 in, and then this would be a much better version of the Sicilian for black. So yeah, I spent a little bit of thought here, I think, and then just played knight f6, because now, yeah, there's no c4 because black can go bishop takes e4. And white went bishop g5, which I think is logical because it actually prevents me from taking on e4. Like if knight e4, there's knight c6, and if bishop e4, then there's bishop takes f6. And so black loses a piece in both cases. But I don't think this is so good because now I go e6 myself. And yeah, we're getting kind of like a typical structure. Maybe white could play c4 at some point, but even if white does play c4, I don't think actually the bishop is so well placed on g5. I think it would rather be like either on e3 if possible, or on b2. On g5, I think it's yeah, just kind of easily neutralized with bishop e7. So bishop g5, e6, and now queen f3. So I checked actually the game afterwards, like at least the opening with the engine, and it was saying on knight f6, white should actually just take on c6 right away. And so this is the problem that I didn't really realize, because I guess I was only thinking about like e5 here, but black can just take, and white can't take back on e5 because there's an issue with the back rank. But white doesn't have to rush with e5. White can go queen f3, which I definitely didn't really realize the strength of here, because now e5 is annoying, and then white wants queen takes c6, which is a problem. So I probably have to go e5 myself, but then white can bring the knight to d2, knight c4, and yeah, well, computer gives white a big advantage, so I'm not gonna argue with that. definitely seems to be the case. So yeah, that was kind of the refutation. I guess that's why black should start with rook c8. So then knight takes c6, I can take with the rook, and then this is, of course, far less scary. And here I think black is totally fine. So anyway, knight f6, bishop g5, e6, queen f3. And yeah, I felt like black could just make a normal move here, bishop e7. And I didn't see anything really wrong with this, because if knight c6 and e5, I'm actually not totally sure if this is okay for black. Maybe knight d5 and there's no real issues. I'm not sure, but I have other moves as well. Like I can also play like rook c8 if I'm worried about knight takes c6, and I'm definitely not really concerned about bishop takes f6 here, because I'll get the bishop pair. But then I realized I can just play this move queen a5, hitting bishop on g5 and rook on e1, and it's kind of annoying to deal with because white has to defend both of these pieces. So if queen e3, I think I was thinking just bishop e7 here, and then knight g4 is an annoying threat, and so white has to lose even more time trying to deal with this. Even if white plays h3, I think black will go knight g4 anyway and take the dark squared bishop. So white has to go back bishop d2, but now I feel like this is in my favor because the bishop definitely doesn't want to be on d2, and so I go back queen c7. Maybe I could have done queen b6 as well, like hitting the knight and pawn, but I thought bishop c3, maybe this is helping a little to white. Now I'm not sure actually, because with the bishop on c3, I'm blocking the c pawn. So maybe this would have been the most logical continuation. Because I go back and then white gets c4. In here, I think white's position is perfectly reasonable because now she gets knight c3, castles, and rook c1. So with rook c1, of course, white is intending moves like knight d5, mainly knight d5, which is a big problem. If I take the knight, then white takes with the c pawn and opens up the rook and wins back the piece. So I decided to go queen b6. And okay, I felt like I'm moving the queen a lot, but I'm moving it with tempo. I'm forcing white to misplace their pieces. So it's, yeah, definitely felt justified. Now hitting the knight and the pawn. So knight b3, which I thought made sense. And now I go rook fc8. So my idea with this was that I basically just wanted to reposition my queen. Like in case of bishop e3, I'd probably go back queen d8. Most likely because queen c7 again would run into knight d5. So queen d8, and yeah, my plan was I want rook a b8 and then b5 somewhere, and that looked quite reasonable. I felt like black can get good counterplay this way. But one move I kind of underestimated was knight d5 here, which I realized was possible, to be honest. I just thought that black would have options. And that's true, black does have some options here. But I was thinking I could, for one, take with the bishop. I guess I should say white's main idea is e takes d5 is met with e d5 in this case. So this bishop is hanging, and so white wins back the piece. But I thought I could take like this and go e5, which I thought was reasonable. But then upon getting to this position, I started thinking, well, black is probably just a bit worse here, just because I do have the worst bishop, and at some point it feels like white can kind of break with c5. And I also thought I would have this option, which I ended up playing in the game. Knight takes d5, pawn takes, and now bishop d7. Just keeping the bishop pair and getting ready to recapture on e6 with the bishop, which I thought was pretty reasonable. Yeah, actually, apparently I should have taken here. And after e takes d5, bishop takes d5, pawn takes, apparently black can take on c1. Let's say bishop takes c1, and then just go bishop f8. And so I kind of rejected this because I just thought white looks better because I have the worst bishop. But okay, Compy thinks black is actually a little bit ahead here because of queen b5 ideas hitting the d pawn. So that's kind of annoying. Black will play queen b5, and then let's say white will have to react like rook d1 to defend the pawn. Then black can take over like rook e8, and yeah, maybe even rook e5 and try to surround the pawn. So okay, I guess the engine sees that this pawn on d5 is actually kind of a weakness, and that gives black maybe even a small plus. But yeah, during the game I just wasn't looking in that direction at all. So I end up taking on d5 with the knight, pawn takes, bishop d7, and here comes bishop e3. And so originally I guess I had wanted either queen c7 or queen d8 here. I think I was going to decide. But then I started noticing like queen c7, white's going c5, maybe other moves as well, but c5 looked kind of annoying. And I thought I'm not really keeping the bishop pair, like take, bishop takes c5. It's hard to avoid these trades. My queen isn't well placed on the c file. And so this position I wasn't really liking. I definitely didn't see how black could really play for a win here. And then on queen d8, the issue was that white can take on e6 and take on b7. And I can take the pawn back on c4, but as soon as I take on c4, eventually my bishop is leaving the e-file, and white's going to have some bishop b6 ideas. So this is kind of annoying. Like if I go rook c4 right away, then take, bishop b6 is an annoying double attack against the queen and bishop. And then just for example, queen b8, white takes here, queen takes b6, queen e8 check, and game over. So that didn't really look too promising. I also have like rook c7, but then just like queen goes back to f3 even, doesn't have to defend the c pawn. And again, if I take on c4 twice, white has bishop b6, where I can't take because the rook on a8 is hanging, and then if I move my queen somewhere, rook takes e7 is happening. So this didn't look fun at all. Apparently, I think Compy says I can go queen b8. No, queen c8, excuse me. And the idea is that if rook takes e7, there's bishop takes b3, and queen c1 check is in the position. But yeah, I mean, this was very far. And so I was like, I'm not finding queen c8. But also, white doesn't have to play bishop b6 here. White has other moves, like knight a5, for example, is apparently also strong, hitting the bishop and hitting like knight c6 ideas. So yeah, this was definitely not something I wanted to go into. So on bishop b3, not having any of these other two moves, I played only my third option, queen b4, which, okay, is also a move because there's no way to kind of trap the queen. But it does allow white to go bishop d2. And now I have a choice. Either I can repeat with queen b6 or I can go queen a4. And originally I did want queen a4, but again, white can take on e6, bishop takes e6, maybe take on b7. I'd go bishop f6 looking for some compensation. But now bishop c3. And yeah, I just wasn't totally sure about this position. I think black is okay here, but after takes, you know, I was worried about ideas of like rook takes e6, followed by rook g3, with a lot of counterplay against my king. I don't know if that's exactly working, but at least from afar, it looks scary. If g6, then the rook goes to h3, and I have to keep making more weaknesses. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, probably black can take on a2 so that there's some queen b1 checks in the position, so that white has some back rank issues. And I think black is fine, maybe more than fine. I got like rook a b8, but yeah, somehow I wasn't totally sure. Also, white has options like here as well. After bishop takes e6, maybe white can go knight d4, in fact, and just attack the bishop. And yeah, I really wasn't sure, because if I go like queen d7, knight takes e6, fe, I think black's just worse here. White structure is better. Queen is more active, so I feel like I'm just kind of fighting for a draw at this point. So yeah, rather than go queen a4, I went back queen b6, and at this point, it wasn't necessarily clear that to me that my opponent wanted to make a draw just based on her style of play. She seemed, you know, very aggressive, and anyways came bishop e3. And so now, okay, definitely, like, I didn't want to repeat, but at the same time, I also didn't want to fall into a worse position and then just try to scramble to save the game. So yeah, if we go into a position where I don't have a lot of winning chances and then I end up making a draw anyway, I didn't really see the value of that. So I definitely wanted to play on, but yeah, I kind of didn't see the upside. So I go queen b4. And then comes bishop d2. So now I'm like, oh, dang, okay, I was really hoping, yeah, she would repeat, but she does start repeating. And once again, like, I wanted to play on, but I remember one time a couple years ago, I was upset about drawing with like a slightly lower rated player, and my coach basically said, like, Kostya, stop crying. Draw is a normal result. I was just like, okay, fine. And you know, I would lose a lot of games against low-rated players by just taking on way too much risk and just getting into a lost position. So for this game, I was like, all right, you know what? If it's a draw, it's a draw. I'm not going to complain. I have the black pieces. Next round, I'll get white. I'll try to win. So I go queen b6 and bishop a5. So at this point, actually, we've already repeated 3 times. So we started with this position after takes bishop d7. This is 1. With the bishop on d2, queen on b6. So bishop e3, I went up, bishop d2. This is already 2 repetitions. And so here, after queen b4, bishop d2, technically black here could stop the clock and say queen b6, and that's going to be 3 time. I decided to play it because I, you know, wanted my opponent to find some way to play on. And at this point, white also could have just claimed like that we've had the position 3 times and it would be a draw. And so actually, psychologically, I'd kind of given up. I just accepted, like, okay, we're repeating. We're going to make a draw. Because I felt like white also doesn't really have a right to play on here, given I have the 2 bishops. And yeah, I didn't see how white could really continue pushing. But came bishop a5, which, yeah, definitely was a very pleasant surprise. Because I only have one move here. I have to go queen a7. But I didn't really think this was that scary because I'm just going to get b6 or b5 in next anyway. But okay, here comes queen g4, So I realized my opponent's idea is she wants to pull back with bishop c3 and target g7, which did look kind of scary, and then maybe like rook e3, rook g3 at some point. But the issue is on b6, I'm defending the bishop on d7. So b6, and now bishop c3, well, now the bishop on d7 is no longer hanging. Of course, that was one of the ideas behind queen g4 to make this pin. And now black, not e takes d5, but of course e5 can be played. So covering the mate, hitting the queen. Also, I'm hitting the c-pawn. So now this is kind of a problem for white. So if the queen doesn't defend the pawn, I'll probably take it. So queen e2. And then I can play either f5 here or start bringing my rooks over to the king side. But now this structure just looks very good for black because I've got the two bishops. I got c5 under control. Knight on b3 isn't well placed. And yeah, I think black is just already better here. So here, all of a sudden, I felt, yeah, very good about my position. And then here comes d takes e6. So this is a very committal move because after bishop takes e6, now white has two pieces hanging and essentially is forced to sacrifice the exchange. I got to take because queen d7, rook e4, and black doesn't get the material. So takes, queen takes, king h8, and bishop c3. And so all of a sudden black has an exchange for one pawn. But admittedly, white does have some annoying play against the king, like g7 is kind of weak. So I pretty quickly just played bishop f8. I think I was just happy that, the span of a few minutes, I went from being in the game to, oh no, we have a repetition, the game's over, to now like just back into the fight. So without thinking too much, yeah, I just played bishop f8, just kind of like defending, looking to get the rooks in. Compy hates bishop f8. Compy says rook f8, much stronger. Try to play bishop f6 and challenge white's bishop on the diagonal, which makes a lot of sense. Even if I have to give up the d pawn, it just means so much more to black to just get the heavy pieces out quickly. Yeah, basically, yeah, I just wasn't like right in the right mindset to kind of play like this. I was like, let's just be safe. Now came knight d4, and actually in this moment, originally I wanted b5 here because I thought there was a nice trick. If c takes b5, queen takes d4, and black wins. But on knight f5, this looked a little bit scary, but I'd calculated rook takes c4, and now knight h6. Here I thought rook takes c3, knight f7 check, queen takes f7, and black wins, because again, white's back rank is hanging. But then I was like looking at this for like a couple minutes, because I was like, okay, if this works, I mean, it's like, it's game over, because I get b5, I'm taking c4, if white doesn't have this knight f5, knight h6, white doesn't have anything. Of course, okay, I realized in time, knight f5, rook c4, knight h6, rook takes c3, there's a problem. It actually took me like a little bit to find this. And then I showed this to my friend, and then he also didn't see it right away. So that kind of made me feel better about it. Okay, so you can save your comments. But yeah, queen g8. Queen g8. So this actually would have been an insane way to lose the game, because here after rook c4, knight h6 is actually just game over. Black can't defend against both of white's threats. So I thought I have knight f7 covered with rook c3, but of course queen g8 is a bigger problem. So, okay, I came to my senses in time. I just played rook e8. And here I'm just trying to cover as many squares on the king side as possible. So queen e7. Knight f5, I went queen e6. I'm more than happy with the queen trade here. I'll try to convert that in game. So white goes queen f3. And now rook a7. So now it felt like the move started to flow a bit more. I really like this move because I cover everything on the 7th rank, which is nice. And the rook can at some point swing over to f7, harass the knight on f5. So here white goes g4, probably anticipating this rook f7 idea to support the knight, and also fixes the back rank because now rook e1 is possible again. So I go queen e4, hitting the queen g3, and I drop back because rook e1 there was a little bit annoying, so I decide to just get out of the way. Now h4. So I realized, okay, white's plan is pretty straightforward. She wants to go h5, maybe h6 somewhere. So king g8. So then on h5, h6, I could meet that with g6. And then white's attack is not so obvious. Also with king g8, I want to take on c4 because white doesn't have any good discoveries with the bishop given that the rook is hanging. So queen f4, defending the pawn. And now I get a chance to play d5. So I've definitely been wanting to play this move for a little while, d5 or b5. Earlier with my queen on e4, it would have been, yeah, very bad to play d5 because of rook e1, and that's no good. So once I got d5, and now I started feeling really good about my chances, because now the bishop can activate via the c5 square. I'm opening up more lines for the rooks, and now it feels like I'm, yeah, can really play with the extra exchange. So takes, queen g5, threatening knight h6 check. I go queen f3, and now my idea was to come up with like rook e4 and go after white's kingside. So knight d4, white's kind of forced to do this, I think, to kick the queen out. Queen f7, and white went back knight f5. At first here, I actually wanted to take the pawn on a2, but then I realized white is just going h5, and here this is kind of annoying, and I didn't realize, I didn't understand why I should allow this, when in fact I can just play like queen g6 here and just fight on the more important side of the board, the king side. And now this one's kind of annoying for white, actually, because with queen g6, of course, if white trades queens, I'm happy there. But if the queen drops back like queen f4, I'm getting h5, which I thought was pretty annoying to deal with. And if g5, then rook f7. The rook comes in, and the knight on f5 is lost. So white would have to play something like f3, but then I think I would be happy here. I'm not even sure if I would rush with taking, because then white would take back and have like h5. Maybe I would just go like king h7. Just like improving the king, or maybe rook f7. Then at some point the bishop can come out as well. And yeah, it just felt like black is making good progress here. But instead came bishop d4, which was definitely surprising because it allows black to trade queens right away. Of course, white is hitting the pawn on b6 and wants to invade with the rook. But then I just found like a tactical idea here, and almost immediately went for it. Because at this point we're kind of approaching time pressure. So yeah, not a lot of time for either player to figure this out. But rook e4 felt very convincing, because I'm turning rook takes g4, which wins the queen. And then if white moves the king, I'm just taking on g4 anyway. And after f3, which seems like white's most logical move, this ended up being played. I got queen takes g5 and rook takes d4. And the bishop comes out to c5, and it's just immediately game over, because black is either winning a piece, rook d1 and rook to d7, or otherwise white has to give the exchange with rook takes c5, which is what happened in the game. So f3, I guess, was the decisive mistake, but at this point I think it's really hard for white, because yeah, if takes, then hg, and then the knight is hanging, the pawn is hanging, the bishop is hanging, so everything is kind of hanging here for white. And yeah, I'm not even sure what else white can play. Maybe king h2. But minimum here, I can go rook takes g4, maybe right away. I can also trade first and then go rook takes g4, because this kind of endgame, let's say rook to b7, the g pawn is hanging, the b pawn is hanging. So yeah, this will definitely still be some work to do, but yeah, I think objectively black should be pretty good here. But yeah, after f3 it was basically game over. The game finished takes, knight b3, I push c4, knight d2, and just like simple rook c7, just trading off one pawn to get the rook in, king e1, rook a3, and yeah, here white resigned because there's no way to defend the a pawn, and then the rest is pretty simple from there. So yeah, I was happy to win the game, not super happy with like how it went, because I felt like, okay, the opponent obviously could have made a draw, and you know, showed more courage than I did to play on, and then I ended up profiting from that. So yeah, I'll take it. I don't know. I felt like once I won the exchange, or got the exchange, then of course, you know, from there I thought my play was pretty reasonable, so I was happy with that. And yeah, I wasn't sure. I mean, this is definitely gonna be like the biggest decision to kind of come back to, I think, for me, for analysis. Like, given that I went knight d5 here, of course I had better options, bishop d7. At this point, like, how exactly should I have continued the game? Because objectively, I think maybe I should have tried to play on here, like queen b4 and like queen a4. Maybe I should have tried harder to. No, but then it takes knight d4. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know how I should have continued this one. It's an interesting question. But yeah, after this game, I was now on 5.5 out of 8, and definitely hoping to win the last one to get a good score. Alright, folks, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.